folks, welcome to the Sunday Civics Citizenship Lab. Folks are coming in, and I am so grateful for this time that we get to spend together this power hour of learning civics and being in community together to take action, take civic action in our communities. For those of you who are in Nubian Narrative, I talked about that I was coming into this first class, coming from a civic action, participating in a rally for the nurses that are striking for better working conditions. And so I came straight from there, participating in a civic action to come today for our first class together, our first civics class together. In this Citizenship Lab, where we are going to learn some of the basics of civics and civic engagement and how we collectively can take action and be engaged in community to make our communities better. And we have a ton of history to review so that you see that this is not something that is new, the period that we are in, but this is something that we can learn from our past, take new tools, new resources, new commitment, and be able to apply it to where we are today. So what are we going to do today? First, we are going to talk about what civics is. We spend a lot of time focusing on only one aspect of civic engagement, which is voting. So we're going to talk about it in a wider context. And then we're also going to go back in time and learn some history of others who have been in the same space of teaching civics for action. And then I'm going to give you some homework because what would be a class, what would be Sunday civics related activity without learning something and having homework. Those of you who listen to the show know that I do what's called a do now for every Sunday, where I invite you to take civic action in something that we talked about on the show that you then go apply into your community. And so we're going to do the same thing today. But before we get started, I know some of you who are dropping in, this may be your first time, your first introduction, and you are not clear yet if you're going to be here for the whole 4 weeks. That is totally fine. We're meeting people where they are. But for those of you who are interested, you are going to commit yourself to be part of this class, this workshop, this experiment, as Karen explained it. I am dropping they'll be dropping in the chat a link for you to complete a short survey. I'm not asking for your email address. I'm not trying to contact you outside. But really, I want to be guided by who is in the room. So I want to know just, your initials or first name, but more importantly, the state or local area that you are dialing in from, so that we can tailor the information that we are going to learn together based upon where you are. We'll talk about being rooted locally a lot when we talk about the history of citizenship schools. And then what you hope to learn. So that way we can tailor the conversation, we can tailor what we are learning to what is needed right now, which is also rooted in the history of citizenship schools, in that you learn by doing, by practicing, but also making sure that it is rooted locally and rooted in the things that you need to learn right at this moment. So my team is there. They're going to drop the link in the chat so that everybody has that. And again, if you are going to be joining us for the next 4 weeks, I invite you, no pressure. Again, I'm not collecting your emails or anything. It's really just to guide where we are going to go. Okay. So the first, after you complete that, the first thing we want to talk about is what is civics. Now, this is very, very, very important because we have been taught all of our lives that civic engagement is voting and civic engagement is doing service projects. Even when I do speeches related to MLK or Black history or even civic engagement, I talk about that fact that we have been conditioned to believe that civic engagement is like picking up trash at the park or volunteering an hour here or there, or committing some sort of act of charity. And then making sure that you vote, and not voting locally or every election, but voting every 4 years. We only ramp up our voting apparatus every 4 years. And that does us a disservice because we miss primaries, we miss other types of local engagement. And that is because it is designed that way for suppression efforts, right? The least people that are participating in the action means that the least people that you have to serve, that you have to honor the issues and things that they are concerned about. So the first thing I want to do for you is level set what civics is. So let's show what that is. Okay. Civics is how everyday people learn, organize, and use power to shape their communities and their future. Now, this is the definition, this is the working definition that I use from everything from training teenagers to training elders, right? I believe that it is deliberate that in the common conversation, we take out the word power. And we're going to have a whole lesson just on power next week. But I think this is by design, and is by design to make people feel like they are powerless, to make people feel like they have no say, that you don't even have the right to voice how you want to be governed, how you want certain things to operate. The key first word here is learning. And learning, yes, how the process works, but you learn how the process works sometimes so you can break it, so you can remake it. But learning who the power players are, who the decision makers are, learning, what the root of the issues that you want to address in your community are. So first you learn, then you organize, and that is building with like-minded people, like who are on here today. Sometimes it is organizing with people that only agree with you on one particular issue and may disagree with you on another. But you learn, you organize, and then you use the power that you have organized and built to shape your future, to shape your community, to shape a country. And in this working definition that I use, it is very active. It is not a passive action. You are not waiting until election day. You are not waiting until a problem arises. You are directly engaged and have a hand in what is happening. And you and the people that you are organizing with are controlling what is happening locally in your community and in your country. Civic engagement is not passive. It is not charity work. It is not setting democracy and forgetting it and letting it roll on, as it goes, and you just, on the roller coaster up and down. It is an active practice that you practice daily because you live in a society and engagement that requires that. Otherwise, wealthy people wouldn't pay as much money as they do for lobbyists, for consultants, or for others to keep their issues at the forefront of other people's, whether there's in terms of elected officials or political folks. They wouldn't do that on a regular basis if they didn't know that participation, that engagement, that voicing their issues, voicing what matters to their bottom line didn't matter. So civics is an active requires active participation. So now that we know that, now that it requires us to be engaged, it requires us to do something. I have a question for you that are in this class, and maybe the team that are on can share some of the comments that people will have. This is an activity I want us to do on the next slide. I want you to think about where your political values come from. Who gave it to you? What is it that made you believe that everybody deserves health care? Where did that come from? If you align with a political party, where did that come from? And drop it in the chat or share. And I want to highlight some of your responses and talk about that. Let's see. Let's see. I see some responses. Jarvis said political values came from parents and grandparents. This is a standard, right? I remember when I left home and I registered to vote for the first time because I was underage when I went to college. And so when I turned 18, it was the second semester of my freshman year. And I remember registering, and I called my mom and I said, "Are we Democrats or Republicans?" And she was like, "We're Republicans." And I was like, "Okay." And so that's how I registered. And it just so happened to be an election happening, a local election happening for mayor. And this was in Hempstead, New York. And the person running for mayor at the time was a Black man. And so for my instance, it was like my mom said we're Republican. The man running where I live in Hempstead is a brother, and he's running as a Republican for mayor. I guess I'm a Republican. I didn't question it. I didn't have any doubts. I just called my mom and was like, "This is where I am." I would later align my values differently, but the first thing I did was call my mom. Let's see. Sharon said her political values came from her mom. A lot of people saying that their parents were activists and their political values came from the community that they were in. And a lot of people talking about parents. Charles, this is a good one, that yours were shaped by spiritual beliefs. Faith is extremely, extremely important to people's values. It helps set what people believe. And for a lot of people, that's why you also see churches or religious institutions align with different political institutions, because your values in general come, if you are a faith-based person, may come from faith. And then it is a logical leap for you to go to political values from that standpoint. So spiritual beliefs definitely can play a role. Let's see, Andrew, my political values didn't come from a party, but being a part of a community activist organization. I see a lot of Pan-Africanists in the chat. Melanie, I want to honor your comment because you said that your students say that they get their news from social media, from TikTok and others. I have kids that that's where they're getting their information from as well. And their values are being shaped by what's popular on the algorithm. Which means then that they are subject to the whims of whatever algorithm is being produced. And that is where their values lie, on what's popular, rather than, what is a core belief for them. Okay. All of the answers and the responses that folks are providing are normal, right? You get it from school, from community, from the people who raised you, from the community. If you are engaged at an early age, you sort of adopt where that is. My political evolution, as an anecdotal example, right, went from my mom, who was a Republican, and that's where we are, to then me having a political rebirth in myself and deciding what my values were, and then aligning with a party that would meet those needs at that time, and also based on where I locally was. Because a lot of times we may say that our political values are this and align with a particular party, but then how are you able to practice those values and those political things that you want to see in the local area that you are in? So if you're in a place like New York, where Democrats outnumber Republicans, I think it's 8-1 in New York right now. If I register at a different party, I'm going to have less of a voice because majority of the contest is in the Democratic Party. If I want my voice to be at the table in all aspects, then maybe I need to be here. Doesn't change my political values, but I am operating on what the local structure is and making sure that my voice is heard. And so that is why we have to align not only our values, but then how we exercise that power that I talk about in the definition of civics. Is you're looking at all avenues of how you are able to learn, organize, and wield that power that you are building by being civically engaged. So let's go back a second. I want to go back a second to that definition of civics. Civics is how everyday people, right, not just the leaders, not just elected folks, not just the wealthy, but how everyday people learn, organize, and use power. And we're going to focus on the learn aspect for right now. And then we'll go to organize, and then we'll talk about power. On the learn part, right now we are in a space in our society where we have become consumers of content. That is all we do. We watch things. We may find things that pique our interest, whether they be documentaries or even listening to Dr. Carr on Saturday. But we consume the content, right? It is for the betterment and the improvement of us individually. And if you are a frequent consumer, even when you are purchasing something, right? You are purchasing something, bringing it to you, but then how is it being used to foster additional things for you? How are you using it to organize? How are you using it to build power? And I'm going to talk, y'all can hear me, and I'm going to get my charger at the same time so we don't get cut off. So how are we using that power, what we are learning on a regular basis so that it is beneficial to what we are building in our communities and on the ground? And as we go to, before we move to talking about the history of citizenship schools, I want to ask you all, particularly those of you who, you're in Nubian Narrative. We listen all the time to what is happening on a regular basis from Dr. Carr, from Karen. We listen to SiriusXM on a regular basis. And what do we do with that information? So I want to hear from you. What do you do with the information that you learn from SiriusXM, Urban View, to Dr. Carr on the weekends, to the workshops and things that you are engaged in on a regular basis here in Narrative? What do you do with that information after you get it? I know some of us share it with others. Some of us are teachers and in spaces where we take those lessons, those book recommendations, and we take them and use them in uh, another instance by each one teach one. We may send it to our family members. We may post clips, particularly the YouTube clips, on social media, right? Once you learn the information, what do you do with it? Share with my village, teach others, especially students, share it with mentees. Let's see, Jarvis says, share with others and pivot my political engagement. Regine, you use it when contacting your elected officials. Very good. Share it with family and friends. All of the information we consume, it is our hope, particularly in this space, that we are sharing it with others. Right? That leads to our next point of organizing and building. Right? June, who is in the chat and continues to be a part of our network, and certainly with Sunday Civics, says she's on the board of a task force. Then she uses the information that she gets from Sunday Civics, from listening to Urban View, and shares it with the tenants in her building. She's part of a tenant association, and so she continues to share that information from there. And then as she is organizing, sharing that information, they then use that information, use that power of organization and mobilization to effectuate change in their local community, in their building. And I imagine those of you who are listening and sharing it with others are doing the same thing, where you use that information immediately. Right? And that's what brings me to talking about citizenship schools. Now, I modeled Sunday Civics after the wonderful work of Septima Clark, Dorothy Cotton, so many others from the Highlander Folk School, including Rosa Parks and others, who use citizenship schools to teach everyday people how to build power. Now, I want to sit here for a second and talk about the connection of this. So citizenship schools were done and came out at Septima Clark and the others at Highlander Folk School. And those of you who, I think you can go back and listen to previous episodes where Dr. Carr has talked about Highlander, talked about Septima Clark. The citizenship schools were designed to meet an immediate need, which was locally, there were hundreds of people, hundreds of Black folks who were not registered to vote in places in the South. And we all know that history. We've talked about it a number of times, that the population was extremely high of Black folks in these areas, yet the amount of Black folks who were actually registered was, you can count on one hand in some counties. There was zero in some counties, and all throughout the South. And so what was in place were part of these Jim Crow laws, where there were increased barriers, poll taxes, other suppression tactics that prevented Black folks from registering. One of which was, pass a citizenship test, be able to read. We know the horror stories of Count Jelly Beans in a jar, but there are a number of exhibits. And actually, if you go to New Orleans in one of the museums there, they had an exhibit talking about the organizations that did this similar work in Louisiana. And they would present to you what the citizenship test was. And it was being able to regurgitate facts. How many senators does the state have? Can you recite different points of the Constitution? And so in the citizenship schools, what they would do was they would teach literacy, teach reading, teach basic math, for people to be able to pass those tests so that they can register to vote. So at the one hand, while they were organizing to get rid of the legislative action in certain areas, whether that be through SCLC, NAACP, or others, to remove those barriers, they were also teaching people how to meet them so that they could be registered to vote. And they found that similarly, helping people be able to read also helped them in their everyday lives, helping them with basic math, helping them to read and write so that they could write their name or sign their name on a check or in a contract that they had with a farmer. Being able to use resources in that way that met an immediate need of them being able to navigate the world, but then also connecting it to how you are able to build political power by being registered to vote and us collectively voting together. So it was meeting that immediate need. Yes, we know these racist policies and this legislation exists that says I have to meet this need, I have to meet or jump over this hoop in order to register. So I'm going to teach people how to do that so that they can register. And then now we have the political power necessary to continue to push the law change, to continue to organize and help elect people locally. So that these things can be removed. So it was about moving locally, building power locally, so that people could do this work. Now, I'm going to send a list. We're going to post it in some homework for you. These are a couple of things that you can reach. There's a documentary on Dorothy Cotton. There's documentaries on SNCC and the Citizenship Schools and the Highlander folk schools. But you can also go to the SNCC digital website, and you can see some of the work and the primary sources of what they were doing and how they were building these classes to meet that immediate need. So I'm going to show you some examples. If you go to sncdigital.org, sncdigital.org, you can see particularly on the information, and I'm going to bring it up on the screen in a second. You can see some of the primary sources, particularly of what they use. Sometimes the bags from cleaners, right? And not being able to have the necessary materials in order to teach classes. They used whatever they had at the time to be able to teach people in order to meet that need. And, you know, part of the work as you begin to see this, not only in those documentaries, but I know we've talked about it before in Narrative and Nubia, where we talked about the Lowndes County documentary as well, and talked about that long-term organizing of meeting people exactly where they are, teaching them about the process, teaching them how they can be involved in the process, and then not being domineering about where somebody dropping in and telling you what your community needs. But the citizenship schools also made sure that even as they traveled throughout the South and did these citizenship schools, one, they were training people to then be trainers and teachers in their own communities. So they were teaching, you know, the cleaners, the person who managed the cleaners, or the hairstylist or the barbershop, or for them to be teachers. And then they would then teach others in their community. And then the community would collectively decide what issues they wanted to move forward, what candidates they wanted to support. A lot of times in our most recent time period is people drop in and tell people what they ought to be doing in their own communities, rather than giving people the skills for them to be able to organize and set their own agenda on what their communities need. That is a lot what happens in the organizing space. Also happens a lot in the political space. In fact, our whole political apparatus, party apparatus, is built on training young people, some from other places, from Midwest and northern spaces, to swoop down into low-performing communities and organize those people to elect a candidate, and then they disappear, rather than investing in infrastructure and teaching and training in those communities, so those communities can be built up, not just to elect one particular candidate, but so that they can be civically engaged and also have the power necessary to change their own reality. So when we are learning and when we are building, we are doing so not to be paternalistic and tell people what they should have in their own communities, but we are teaching people and giving them the skills and the know-how so that they can organize amongst themselves and have self-determination on what their communities need, who they want to represent them, and be able to set a future that they can all be vested in. Okay, so let me give to you, I don't know how many people you can put in the chat have seen the Lowndes County documentary that specifically talks about the long form learning and organizing. That will be part of your homework as well. If you have not watched it, we will share that in the homework that you will watch. But I want to bring up really quickly let's see, share my screen. Here we go. Here we go. Take this down and we will share. There we go. So on the SNCC digital website, and folks, if you have not been on the digital SNCC gateway, our elders built this for a reason, for them to share the information. There are wonderful primary resources on there. I know Dr. Carr has brought it up numerous times as well, but there are interviews, first-person interviews that you can hear from our elders from during this time, resources, teacher resources, and you don't have to be a teacher to be able to use this information. It can be a self-guide for yourself. But here in the Septima Clark piece, one of the things that I wanted to show you of these primary sources. Oops. Here we go. I wanted to show you these primary sources because this is an example of the workbook from the Citizenship Schools. And here, if we go to the purpose, the Citizenship Schools are for adults. Their immediate program is literacy. They enable students to pass literacy tests for voting, but there is involved in the mechanics of learning to read and write and all around education and community development, which includes housing, recreation, health, and improved home life. Specific subjects are emphasized such as safe driving, Social Security, cooperatives, and income tax, and an understanding of tax-supported resource such as water testing for wells and aid for handicapped children. The Citizenship Schools provide a service to the people which is not available through any other private or public programs at the present time. They are open to all people of a community who face problems related to first-class citizenship and want to do something about them. Now, this is important because, as I said, what it does is establishes that the information that they were sharing at this particular time, the training that they were doing, wasn't just, oh, come here and vote for president. it was also like, I'm going to help with this immediate need of literacy, of things like banking, of getting your social security number, which, people remember social security didn't come with the founding of the country, right? Is making sure people had the number and invested in the system, making sure that they, whatever resources and things that they were entitled to, that they got access to it. And that was meeting a specific need at the time. And then the political education and engagement at the same time. Now that you know how to read, now that you know how to pass this test, now you can register to vote. And now you can be part of the political process of organizing and engaging so that we can have self-determination of our communities. Right? Now, I want you to think about, in this time that we are in right now, what are some of the things, some of the barriers, some of the things that we could do if you were designing your own citizenship class in your local neighborhood, in your local community? What would be some of the immediate things that you would have to include that would be helpful to people, and then being able to connect that to political organizing and engagement? So back then, right, there are these citizenship tests which you have to pass. You have to get the answers correctly in order for you to register to vote. What are some other barriers? What are some other things that you can think of locally where you are that you would need to include in order to get people over the hump? And I see the question of dropping the link to the workbook. I'm going to drop the SNCC Gateway link and the workbook again in the chat for those of you who want to take a look and share. And I invite you again to look at that as part of your homework and resources at your leisure for that. So the question is, what are some of the things, if you were to do a citizenship class in your local community, what would you want to add, speaking to an immediate need that would be beneficial? So Destiny says language interpreters available to assist people. Rodriguez, understanding the city process. Very, very important, because people's only expectation of political engagement, because that's what they hear on a regular basis, is the federal government. When local and state laws, impact your daily life way more on a frequent basis than what's happening on the federal level a lot of times. All right. Let's see. Understanding the city process. Gwen, this is a big, Gwen says apathy has to be addressed. Very, very important. Because when you have people apathetic, that suppress votes and it's doing their job. So yesterday when I was on with Karen, and I don't know if Karen is still here, but Karen was saying, we're not, maybe we won't have an election. And I was like, don't say that, right? Because part of the thing of creating doubt, of sowing doubt on, are we going to have an election? Are they trying to steal the election, right? Is creating doubt in our minds already, right? That there's not going to be an election. It is part of suppression activities. The reason why the Trump administration would we're going to seize records here and we're going to take over things here is sowing discord and creating the confusion, the distrust, and so that it allows for other people to pull away. Well, they're just going to steal it anyway. They're crooked anyway. And then that suppresses people from actually being engaged and participating, because they just going to steal it. So what's the point of me voting? Right? That is part of voter suppression. And so we want to make sure that we are talking positively and engaging about our power. We don't have an election because the people demand we have an election, because we're going to follow the rules and make sure that we are engaged in there. Now, if you've been listening to Sunday Civics for a long time, I'm going to bring up an issue, something that we've talked about before, and that is voter ID. We have talked to a number of organizations who started out trying to get people in the states that pass laws and requiring them to have identification in order to register and vote, where they would go out trying to get their candidate elected or trying to address an issue and saying, we're going to help you get an ID so you can vote. And then in the interviews and conversations with folks, people figured out like there's actually millions of Americans, Black, white, Latino, what have you, that do not have the identification necessary, not only to vote, but for basic life things. Right? Having ID allows you to access different services. Having an ID, prevents you from having to go to different agencies to get verification on who you are, who your children are, in order for you to access services. And so for all of the people that we talk to who do this work of helping people get identification, what they realize, it also helps them expand and get access to the resources and things that they need for basic life, helping them get a driver's license, learning how to drive so that they can, access different employment opportunities because now they are able to drive or, drive for work or things of that nature. Having, an actual copy of your birth certificate, because sometimes parents act like it's their private property. But all of those things that you would need, that we take for granted, some of us take for granted, oh, I have identification. In fact, I have multiple forms of identification. That there are millions of Americans who do not have that for whatever reason. And that is something that it has been found that even in doing citizenship class or those works, empowering people with those documents, then also not only connects them to voting, it also connects and opens them up to additional resources from there. So that is an example of something else that would be included in the citizenship schools as well. So we are about to come onto the time where I'm going to talk about homework, and then we're going to be in dialogue. And I want to drop in the chat one more time for those of you who are going to be taking this course over the next couple of weeks. I want to make sure that we tailor the information to what is happening locally with you. Again, I'm not asking for your email address or any of that kind of thing. I'm not going to be like marketing and selling stuff to you, but it's really for us to understand where you are in the country, what states, that would help define what we are going to dive into later. Next week's class will be a heavy one. I'm waiting for, I didn't want to shock you immediately with class one. But next week's class, we're going to talk about power, and we're going to talk about doing a landscape analysis. These are actual things that strategists do. A landscape analysis. I may write a landscape analysis for a client who's running for public office, for an organization who is looking to get legislation passed. But it is also something that you can do in your community. I think it's a real important tool to be able to survey your community locally. And one aspect of the citizenship schools and the documentary that I'm going to have you watch as part of your homework about Lowndes County, Mississippi, is that we often equate that phrase, our ancestors died for the right to vote. And we boil that down to they died for you to have a voter registration card. Not really. What they did is they had already demonstrated that they can build communities, cities, institutions, and businesses. What they wanted was political power so that they could protect what they built and also protect their families and their children. So they wanted to be able to have a say in who the sheriff was, right? Because in a lot of places in the South and the Midwest, the sheriff is elected. And they wanted a say in who that was so they wouldn't have a Klan member that was the sheriff, or someone who would allow the KKK to terrorize their communities. They wanted local power. They wanted to be able to have a say and have input on state government, right? Because they were, presumably paying taxes and their resources being siphoned to build communities that had all of the resources necessary, all of the books necessary for their libraries, for their schools. But they were then segregated into communities that weren't invested in, right? Those are the things that they wanted. They wanted local power and control and a say so. They didn't want to take over a county and do to white people what white people were doing to black people. They wanted their voice at the table. They wanted to operate in the fullness of their citizenship. And it wasn't about going in to choose between the lesser of two evils or being able to register Democrat or Republican. It was about local control and power. So do not be afraid of the word power. Wealthy people certainly are not. They make you feel like you should be. You should not be. And so next week, what we are going to talk about is power, different aspects of power. And we're going to do a landscape analysis. And what you are going to walk away with is being able to do a landscape analysis, not of the country, but of the county and the local community that you live in, and then being able to immediately act on that. So the homework for this week, if you have not already seen, and maybe you need to watch it again, I think I've watched it like 4 times, is Lowndes County and the Road to Black Power. And it's for free and streaming on a lot of different places. So I'm not going to give you one particular place because I don't want to endorse one particular streaming piece, but it's Lowndes County and the Road to Black Power. And then when we come in next week, we're going to start at that point, right? We're going to start at that point and talking about power, different aspects of power. And then I will teach you how to do a landscape analysis. And then your homework will be to do one of your own local and county level. So I am going to stop there, and then we'll take some early questions from folks for this first class in terms of where we want to go. And again, we will drop the link again for those of you who will be with us for the next 4 weeks. And one of the questions I put in that quick form is what you're hoping to learn, what you're hoping to get out of these first 4 weeks as our experiment for this Citizenship Lab that we are in right now. All right. Let's see if we have questions. Zen and other folks can bring up to me. We will share also, I'll put a post for Nubia Narrative. I'm going to put a post this evening that is going to have all of the links to the things that we shared, as well as the homework. So you'll be able to take that and use that. And I see a lot of folks dropping in the chat, like where they're coming in from. And let's see. Yeah, although any questions? I don't see any. Oh, you could. There we go. And for those of you who are watching later, we'll be sure to share the link as well. The form just asks for, a name, what state you're joining from. If you are currently involved in civic or community work, it'll be helpful to know. It's okay if you're not. No shame in that. And then what are you hoping to strengthen or learn during these first 4 weeks of the Citizenship Lab? It would be helpful for me as I tailor the information to that we are going to be presenting. I also want to use the time to be able to research some local examples from what when you share where you are watching from, so that it can be more relevant to what we will be learning. Warsaw, Virginia. Wow. I've been to Warsaw, Virginia before. um, Tampa, Florida, Jersey, South Carolina. Also been to South Carolina. Albany, I'll be in Albany next week. Albany, New York, Detroit, yep, Las Vegas, Richmond, Rochester. I'm literally, after we end this class, on my way to Syracuse. I actually have a meet and greet in Syracuse for those of you who are in the Western region of New York. I will be there this weekend. Nashville, Tennessee, Pickerton, Ohio. Let's see, a number of you are social action chairs for your fraternity and sorority. Very, very important to be connected to those institutions, to be connected to the institutions where our people are. That is beautiful. So any other questions or comments? I don't see, I know Harlem is in the building. NAACP is certainly in the building. I see y'all, yes. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I don't see any questions, team. So I will make sure to share some of the questions and also the resources that I shared up top. And we will be able to share that in a post so that when we come back next week, we can be ready to learn a full power hour. Next week will be a very heavy learning class, so tell a friend. Anyone who missed coming in today, you can certainly, Paris, I see you're in Syracuse, definitely. We'll be in Syracuse this weekend. I'll be in Syracuse until Saturday. For those of you who are up in that area, and I will drop it in Nubia as well if you want to come and hang out at the meet and greet. Shout out to those of you who joined NAACP. Hopefully you can go there and be engaged in the branches. They certainly need our intergenerational work. And if you are in New York, come join us at New York NAACP. Certainly appreciate it. All right, Zen, Karen, I don't see any other questions. Here's one from Cheryl. Could you go over how we get involved in our school board meetings? Yes, we will absolutely include that, and make sure you put that in the form so that we can make sure to align with that. That will definitely include that from there. I would love to come to Tampa. Would love to. Anyone can always reach out to June if you want to organize a larger citizenship class. I do those. You can always reach out to June Moses on my team as we organize those. Another question was, what is the documentary? Is Lowndes County and the Road to Black Power. That is the homework for this weekend. And then we'll post all of the resources and links from there. Lowndes County is LOWNDES. LOWNDES. Lowndes County and the Road to Black Power. All right. All right, friends, one last time, if you are joining us for the next 4 weeks, please feel free to fill out the form so that we can tailor the information that we are going to be developing together to where people are. We will do a post that will have all of the links and the information we shared. And remember, your homework is to watch the Lowndes County and the Road to Black Power documentary. And then when we come back for next week, we will discuss, we'll have a small amount of time for discussion on the documentary. And then we'll roll right into a lesson on power and landscape analysis. That will be the class for next week. So I hope everyone enjoyed our first class, our introduction, and we'll be back next week at the same time to be in the Citizenship Lab together. All right. So thank you so very much. You're in Nubia Narrative, so feel free to at me with any additional questions and comments so that we can all be in this space together and learn together, and we can tailor what we are learning. And thank you for being a part, all 300 of you. Thank you so very much for being a part of the first hour, and we'll be together next week. Make sure to tell a friend that can possibly join, and those of you who I'll see on the road. Shout out to Kansas. I was actually born in Kansas. Shout out to those of you who are participating and engaging, and we'll see you next week.